The Majority Leader.
Human trafficking affects every state in this nation, every single one of them. In Kentucky, we've heard reports of victims as young as 2 months old, victims of human trafficking. We've heard about a Kentuckian who said she was sold for sex from the age of 5 until she was able to physically break free as an adult. Stories like these may shock the conscience, but they're hardly unique in our country. Now, the Judiciary Committee recently heard the story of Aviva, who was barely a teenager when she was kidnapped and forced into modern slavery. Listen to this. Aviva was sold to as many as 10 different men a night. Freedom stolen from her. Innocence ripped away. Aviva's trafficker tried to stamp out everything that made Aviva Aviva. Aviva even forgot what it felt like to be human anymore. Democrats had said they were in favor of helping victims like Aviva. Democrats had demanded that I bring the Justice for Victims Trafficking Act to the floor. But now that the very legislation is here on the floor, our Democratic friends seem to have changed their tune completely. Totally different tune. Now that they have a chance to actually help the victims, they've decided they're more concerned about a few sentences in the bill, a provision they seemed perfectly fine with until just recently. More concerned about those few sentences than actually solving the problem the bill would address. Now, this provision has been included in countless bills that they have voted for and co-sponsored. It's language they were perfectly happy endorsing again in another bill this very week, 2 days ago. But that bill is designed to help doctors, not children enslaved by sex traffickers. So it's okay to vote for that kind of language if you're trying to help doctors, but not okay to vote for that kind of language if you're trying to help these poor young children. Obviously, our Democratic friends think the doctors are worthy of their help. What about the victims of modern slavery? Now, the rationale, Mr. President, for this filibuster seems to shift by the day, and it's almost incomprehensible. Their foremost concern seems to be about treating this specific kind of money this way versus treating that specific kind of money that way. Hard to follow, isn't it? Focusing all their attention not on the victims of these crimes, but on financial assessments levied from the people who perpetrated them, the traffickers. Honestly, I'm not sure why anyone would think money collected from criminals ought to get more consideration than money collected from law-abiding taxpayers. What a strange argument. But this is where they planted their flag. That ridiculous argument is where they have planted their flag. Their contention is essentially that the victims of trafficking should get no help at all because Democrats say the money they'd receive might be considered, quote, private. And that this bill should not pass, therefore, because the bipartisan Hyde principles it contains might apply to those private funds. If that argument sounds contrived and illogical to you, Mr. President, you're not alone. And now we find out it's not even true. Let me repeat that. The very heart of the Democrats' argument isn't even true. That's what the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service told us just yesterday. So I would ask my Democratic friends to listen to this closely. CRS, Congressional Research Service, answered some very straightforward questions posed by the senior senator from Texas, my friend and colleague, Senator Cornyn. And here's what they said to Senator Cornyn. Money deposited into the general Treasury from traffickers, as the Cornyn Amendment requires, is federal money. According to CRS. So let me repeat, the Democrats have been blocking an anti-slavery bill over money they call private, and they're not even correct about that. Now, our Democratic colleagues have also blocked this bill because they say Hyde has only applied to annual spending or appropriations, not mandatory spending. It's another argument the Congressional Research Service tells us is simply not true. Not true. The experts at CRS say Hyde has applied to mandatory spending of federal funds out of the general treasury as the Cornyn Amendment provides. And CRS concludes that Hyde just applied to mandatory spending in the very doc fix that 100% of our Democratic friends voted for 2 days ago. Now, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the CRS memorandum be included in the record at the end of my remarks.
Without objection.
And I ask my Democratic friends, stop this. Stop this. Take a breath and think about what you're doing. Children are being sold into sexual slavery, having their freedom and self-respect ripped away. Will they finally allow the Senate to help them? Or will they continue some debunked crusade? Now, we've offered several compromises to address the concerns they've raised. We'll soon vote on another one that Senator Cornyn has offered. Been reaching out to our Democratic friends for weeks now to try to find a solution to this non-problem. The findings of CRS make it clear that we are doing nothing extraordinary or unusual here. We're simply applying long-accepted principles that Americans overwhelmingly support. Most people would think that sounds pretty reasonable. So it's time to get serious and pass this important legislation. A large bipartisan majority of the Senate has already voted repeatedly to approve this bill, and with the support of a couple of more courageous Democrats, we can bring an end to this debunked filibuster today. The victims who've survived brutal abuse don't need more of our friends' illogical contortions and justifications. They just need help. And they need it now. They need the help the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act would provide. So why don't we finally get around to fixing this problem? The time to do that is now.